Good evening, brothers and sisters. Welcome to another episode of the Black News Network. I want to talk to you today about something that we mostly fail to do in our society, and that is death, grief, and the afterlife. And how do we deal with these factors that we have to deal with eventually and make the changes necessary so we don't end up on the corner begging for money to put our loved ones to rest. It is such a arduous task to bury a loved one. It is something that we have to do, and it's something that we have failed too many times to do as we live and learn in our lives. One of the things that I want to do today is cover some of the hard to talk about subjects that we will eventually have to deal with one way or another, because we all will go meet our maker eventually. So today, I want to introduce to some and present to others our co-host and friend of mine, Mr. Claude Foster, who will join us now on a discussion about these topics. So far, our Black News Network has covered some of the topics that have been very, very difficult to discuss by our people. Today, hopefully, we'll make that a little bit easier for you. This is the Black News Network, the real voice of Black USA, broadcasting the news live from a Black perspective. I am Brother War Smith, bringing you the news with my co-host, Mr. Claude Foster, from Houston, hailing from other friends from some and partners to many. I'm trying to make up my own stuff here. Mr. Claude Foster, are you ready?
Hi, hello, my brother. How's you doing on this this winter, January day? Can't get up, my lips are froze.
Yeah, we starting out rough this morning, but we starting out either way you look at it. It's a beautiful day.
We finally get it together.
I picked the topic death, grief, and the afterlife. Oh, before I say that, we do not own the rights to the music, but we do own the rights to what we say. And these things that we talk about are sometimes not our personal opinions, but the way society reflects on these particular topics. And we want to be able to bring them to you and give you an idea of where we need to be going with these topics. So without further ado, let's go way to the gusto, Mr. Claude. Let's talk about death. Excuse me, because I got a little sinus thing going on. I have to take my allergy med. Death is something we can't get around. And we've all probably experienced it at one time or another, where we attended a funeral, we participated in a funeral, we lost a loved one. We really had to hold our composure and hold it together for the family and bring our loved one to a beautiful resting place on this earth. It is something that we really don't want to deal with. We don't want to talk about. It's a hush-hush topic in our communities. And we got to get this out, because it's far too many times we see people begging for money. And I don't want to use the word begging because it doesn't sound right, but people asking for money to bury a loved one. It's something we can prepare for. But if we never, ever have that discussion, we're not going to be ready for it. We don't even know if people get sick and they're on their dying bed, that's the wrong time to be saying, well, where is the insurance policy? Or what cemetery they want to be buried in? What type of arrangements have they made? Do they want to get cremated? Do they want to get buried? Do they want to be embalmed? What do they want to be donated? You know, it's so many options out there. Or do they just want to just go to rest without anybody having anything to do with their death? Now, the funeral requires a preacher, a church, a hearse, a notification, an obituary. It's so many little bitty elements that people fail to pay attention to when they go into this arena.
Well,
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Finish what you were saying, brother.
I'm just saying that it is something that I've seen too many times where we scrambling to get this stuff together because we're not addressing it in time of need. The need is before a person gets incapacitated or gets to a point where they're in a comatose and unable to make decisions for themselves. We can make these decisions while we're alive. We just have to face the music that this is something that's inevitable. It's going to happen. So that's what I wanted to open up with, and I want you to come on in with it.
Well, estate planning, how many Black folks plan for the afterlife, plan when somebody passes? The last funeral I went to, like you got these funeral homes that will do everything from A to Z. You got to have the documents and stuff, but they will plan the funeral, preach the funeral. They'll hire one of these itinerant pastors to preach, and you pay the funeral home. You give the funeral home a check, and that's the extent of estate planning for a lot of people, for a lot of Black people, for a lot of poor people. First of all, I just think that Black people, when it comes to estate planning, how often do you hear that term? We got a lot of nonprofits in our communities. We got a lot of organizations. But when was the last time you heard a group having a meeting to talk about it, estate planning, or wills and that kind of stuff? From a political standpoint, from our own existence, we tend to focus on the boogeyman.
What's the boogeyman?
Race. The boogeyman is race.
Uh-huh.
That's the boogeyman. Because our politicians, our liberal politicians, they believe in, just like Obama, they believe in the construct of this country. That if given the liberal ideas of America, the thing that makes America America, Black liberal politicians believe in that same thing. So if you don't do something, that's on you. But we don't. Our churches don't really talk about estate planning. I went to one of the biggest churches in Houston, and I never went to a class on estate planning. There are so many responses to the death of a loved one. Like there's hundreds of responses to the death of a loved one, and so trying to do all that work after somebody dies, when your brain is just unraveling with so many thoughts and
emotions and stuff.
Emotions is hard to do, but I just think that we got to do a better job. Well, one thing, when you look at the disparities in healthcare, in health, and what's the typical insurance policy that a Black person carries? Probably $15,000, enough to bury him and maybe have a few dollars left over. And that ain't just poor Blacks either. So I think we talked about insurance in a previous show. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to estate planning and all that goes in, all the documents and everything that you should have, your financial stuff, your banking stuff. We got families that can't get access to cars and vehicles and bank accounts and all kind of things after a person dies because there was no planning.
And it goes to the state to decide, when you don't have anything on file, to execute your estate.
It basically does. If you don't have anything in writing, if you hadn't written down your intentions, if you hadn't made arrangements, if you don't have power of attorney and all these kind of legal documents and stuff, you're right. The state kind of takes over your affairs.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, why don't we? I mean, given the health disparities, given our shorter lifespans, given all the dynamics that exist in our communities, you would think that this would be the top of our priority.
I agree with
State
you.
planning, after
We've been taught to be quiet about that.
by who?
We've been taught to be quiet about our illnesses, our health conditions. We don't want the world to know. We don't want to go out and say, "Hey, we want to make a plan for our loved ones because we need to bury them." I've experienced it. I've done it for my grandfather. I've done it for my mother, my brother. You know, many people, friends. I mean, they don't have funeral homes in order. They don't have anything in order, and they act like they're gonna live forever, and it really causes a problem for the living. The living ones are the ones who have to go out and get these things in order for the dead. But if we would just take a one day and decide on these basic things, the very first thing I think you really have to do is prepare a will.
Well, they call it an advanced directive document.
Oh, they don't call them wills anymore?
Well, yeah. Hold on a second. Well, I've seen the term advanced directive. Is that you?
What?
Did you knock me off?
No, you on. I can hear you.
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Okay, no, but I see you and I hear you, and it's all fine. I'm still here. Everything should be working just right.
Okay, let me do this.
But if you have to try it again, I understand. But nothing changed. We still in. I still see you and I still hear you.
But people refer, in legal terms, it's an advanced directive. What do you want to happen to all your affairs and stuff once you're gone? They call it an advanced directive. I mean, it's something that you instruct people to do before you die, because you can't do it after you die. So the legal term for that is an advanced directive. And I'm just saying that I don't know what
that's different from a will then.
Well, I think a will is part of it. But an advanced directive is like what you said earlier when you introduced the topic. Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be buried? Do you want, what are your wishes?
Yeah, and it has a lot to do with your religion too. Right. What way you want to die will go out.
Right, but I think the nexus of the show is, why is there a lack of advanced planning in the African American community?
I would say, to start with, Claude, the reason we don't have it is because we don't talk about it. It seems like it's an afterthought for us to discuss what's going on with our health system and our death system. So let's walk through a process of a burial, of a perfect plan. And then we'll break down this plan on what's actually happening. And I'm gonna give you my scenario of a plan, and then you give us yours, and let's see let's compare to both. I'm gonna talk about just a plain burial. First of all, let's say you had a catastrophic accident and you ended up unalived, and now it's time for your family to get involved. So you've been the police or whoever come to your house, notify you, and say, so-and-so just died in a car accident or tragic. I'm just using this as an example now. This is not real. Mm-hmm. Person died. So now you got to first go down to the coroner's office and identify the body. Once you identify the body, then I'm not even going to talk about a hospital stay for an injury. I'm going to talk about you're deceased. So you go down, you identify the body, then you identify the funeral home, if that's what you want to use. And the funeral home dispatches the hearse to go to the hospital and pick up the body. And the only way they can do that is you've told the hospital that this is the funeral home that will be contacting you to pick up our loved one. So the funeral home retrieves the body, and takes it back to the funeral home. And you at that time, they put the body in a holding position where you have to come down to the funeral home in a meeting, official business meeting format, and you sit down with the mortician, the hospital director, and at that point in time, you decide from the start. All right, you have a loved one here. How are you going to pay for it? First thing, that's the first thing they want to know. How are you going to pay for it? So you produce your insurance policy. And if you have an insurance policy for $15,000, that funeral director's objective is to spend $15,000. So now that once you've identified that you do have an insurance policy, then everything can flow. But if you don't have an insurance policy, then what do you got in your pocket? Because now you got to pay for that funeral out of your pocket. And so now you can be a little more conservative with that director, even without an insurance policy. But if you got an insurance policy, his objective is to get that entire insurance policy. So you start with the individual. Do you want the individual embalmed? Now, embalming is a choice in Texas. From the last time I think I understood, you can decide to be embalmed or not get embalmed. If you're not going to get embalmed, you have to be placed in the ground quite fast. So the embalming basically remove blood from your body and replaces the blood with a chemical that's a preservative, and it's called formaldehyde. And that formaldehyde preserves the structure of the cells in the body. So you can last a lot longer in your deceased state once they put you in your coffin and in the ground. So now you've decided that you want to get embalmed. That's a cost. You decided that you want to get the funeral home to go ahead and clothe the individual. That's another cost. But most of the time, the family prepares the suit. I'm using this for a male. The family will take a suit, tie, shirt, all the clothes that the person chose to be buried in, if that person had chose to be buried in these clothes. So now the funeral home dresses it up. Then you pick the coffin. Then you pick the liners of the coffin. Then you pick the day. You pick all these different things. You pick the type of vault that the individual will be placed in. You pick the slot, the location of the slot. You can also do the headstone and all that in this one process. But no, lo and behold, when you see the price of this process, you're going to start whittling down after you say, I want this. Then they're going to show you what it costs. Then you're going to say, take this off, take this off, take that off, because you're talking 10 to 15, maybe in some cases $20,000 for a funeral. Then they're going to try to upsell you on limousine service, where they pick you up at your residence, take you to the funeral, then you're escorted to the cemetery in many states. In some states, you can only go to as far as the pavilion. And then, like in Texas, you can only go as far as the pavilion.
Well, that's at VA cemeteries. Now you can go actually to the grave site
In Texas.
In Texas, if it's a regular burial site, you can actually go to the burial site. If it's a veterans funeral, you have to go to the pavilion.
All right, for military.
For military.
Okay, so
the pavilion.
They don't let you go where they put the
body, not initially, no.
Okay, so at the pavilion, let's do the pavilion to start with. At the pavilion, they're going to give you the key after they seal, and then they're going to fold the flag, and they're going to give you the flag. This is military. And then you leave your loved one right there at the pavilion, and then they take control of the casket and put the casket in the ground. And on a military base, my understanding is they will bury six caskets in a grave.
Well, I'm only familiar with the VA system.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. VA cemeteries. Here at Fort Sam, they put bodies 6 caskets deep.
Do they put them that deep?
Yeah, you don't have a choice on location or anything like that, but you But that's what they do because of the space requirements. And most military cemeteries are pretty much full. But when you get through with that contract in that office at the mortuary, you're going to be out of quite a bit of money. And you have to make sure you've already discussed many of these things with the deceased, because you don't want to dress the deceased up in blue when they want to be dressed up in black and go out in black. You want to know if they want a picture of anything, or any little trinkets in the coffin, or it could be anything. All the little details have to be discussed though. But if you're not discussing these items with your loved ones, then it's your choice to do what you choose to do with that loved one. And 9 times out of 10, some of the things you're going to want to do is not exactly what they would have done for themselves. So it's imperative that you have these discussions while you're alive. And if you have someone over 30 years old, it is time to have that discussion. And if you have someone over 30 and no insurance, then you're threading thin ice, because there's no telling what may happen or when it may happen. You don't know. So you have to have this stuff done as soon as possible, as soon as the conversation can be had. And people get mad at you for wanting to talk about how to bury them. I've seen people get angry about that. We just don't talk about it though. What is it so bad about talking about planning a funeral in our community? Well, talk about it.
I got all kind of books. There's all kind of literature. Let me just go over some. It says a death has occurred. What do you do first? It says, 1, notify these people as soon as possible. Your doctor who can provide a medical certificate or death or request an autopsy to determine the cause of death. The funeral home to arrange.
Let me ask you something on that first one. Is an autopsy option, or can you decide to bypass an autopsy if you choose?
An autopsy is optional because most deaths, the doctor can certify death. You don't need an autopsy. Like with my mother-in-law, my brother, I've had 3 funerals I've gone to within the last couple of years, and none of them had an autopsy. I guess you could if you wanted to be a little bit more finite, because when it comes to Black people, they list the cause of death as obesity or some medical, some type of, they don't check to see have you been poisoned or that kind of stuff. Somebody might want to collect it. I mean, they just don't do an autopsy if there's no suspicious death. And if you probably requested an autopsy, you would probably have to pay for it. If it wasn't required.
Okay, it wasn't considered a homicide or something like that.
Like they put high blood pressure, diabetes, or something like that. They don't.
But if it's a homicide, they're going to do an autopsy anyway.
They could, like if a person was shot in the car, and why would they need to do an autopsy if they determine that the cause of death was a gunshot?
They already know it's a gunshot wound.
Right. But then it says the funeral home to arrange for transfer of the deceased
from the hospital.
Right. Relatives, executor, executrix, and friends. Employers, notify the employer of the deceased and relatives who will need time off. Insurance agents, life, health, or accident. Religious, fraternal, civic, and veterans organizations and our unions, if the members belong, So that's where, how would you know? Let's just say you're someone that you lived out of state, and your mother died, or your father died, or your brother died. How would you know to contact? How would you know that person's life without all that information? A lawyer, accountant, and financial advisor. How many families have a lawyer, an accountant, and a financial advisor?
That's a little out of our league there.
2,
have all that stuff. I know I don't have all that.
2, secure the vital statistics of the deceased. A full legal name. Other names must be identified by also known as AKA, home address and telephone number, name of business of employer's name, address, and telephone number, industry and occupation, military service serial number, date and place of birth, citizenship, father's name and birthplace, mother's name, maiden name and birthplace. Locate the will. So that should be, like you said, a will. How many people have a will? 3, meet with the chosen funeral home. Bring clothing that the deceased will be buried or cremated in. Whether your loved one is to be buried, cremated, or entombed. The funeral director will ask if you have made any arrangements with a cemetery or crematorium. If you have not done this, you will need to visit the cemetery. Service details. Would you like a visitation period, formal service, a reception? Whether a member of the clergy will be engaged for the service. Casket selection, pallbearers, music, pictures, flowers, scripture, or other readings. If you would like a charity to receive donations in lieu of flowers. Collect all these documents that you'll need: the will, legal proof of birth certificate, and social insurance number, marriage licenses, citizenship papers, and any insurance policies, bank books, deeds, and current ownership papers. That's where my brother had a problem, because they couldn't, his daughters couldn't get access to the car because he didn't have that information on file. Income tax returns, receipts or canceled checks, military discharge papers. So that's all those things that we need to do first. And that's an extensive list. And you're grieving in
the family has to know these things.
Right. And the family, and I'm saying that I know I get books like this. This is an older one, End of Life Planning Guide. So there's information out there for our listeners. And so if you go to many of these books are at funeral homes. So families, even before death, can go to any funeral home and they'll have this information available. They have veterans planning guides. That's a whole nother type of situation when it comes to the death of a veteran. Is a little bit differently than just the death of a civilian. And then you can get books about grief. And this is a course that my wife took, Your Journey from Mourning to Joy. So there's a lot, you're dealing with a lot of emotions when it comes to a death. And that is the wrong time to be trying to organize plan a funeral.
Right.
It's when you're emotionally strapped, especially if they're trying to figure out what the insurance policies are, trying to figure out what to call. Now, the good thing about insurance, a lot of insurance companies, you can call one individual, they'll come out to your house and they'll do all that for you. That's what we did with my mother-in-law. These funeral homes, he represented multiple funeral homes, but he comes to your house and the funeral home's paying, but he comes to your house, takes care of everything, makes all the arrangements, because to coordinate a death, or end of life, from the death to the grave, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
And people are just thrust into that position.
Right. They just
to bury someone based on their position in that family.
Whether it's a spouse, whether it's a child, it's normally a spouse, the living spouse, or the children of the spouse.
And you don't want to be looking for paperwork on a person when it's that in that zone, because you really don't have time to be ramshacking through everything that they had in the house. And a lot of times they've been people have not paid attention to what's going on in that individual's life if it's a death that's unexpected or unthought about and unplanned.
Well, and even before death, we got a lot of seniors that are disabled.
They didn't do it. Yeah, they didn't have a conversation.
Right. Never had that conversation. So it's, and I don't see our institutions, and maybe I just haven't been attuned to it, but I don't see that this type of planning as part of our community outreach.
Right. Even with Black veterans, it's a misconception that the military is going to bury you, and you got to come. They're not going to do that for you.
No,
They're going
to. It's only a couple of $100.
Yep. They think that's all you get. They're not buying your coffin. They're not paying for your funeral and your limo services. It's all you getting, like he just said, is a couple $100 from the VA. Now,
but the good thing is the information is out there. Like I told you, the information is there, and these books are free.
And that's the problem. Nobody even thinks about going to get this stuff until it's at the D-Day. It's that time. That's where the problem is. We don't want to confront it until we have to. We're made to confront a death in its reality. Even though, like you said, those books are available right now, free. Mm-hmm. And we don't have that. We don't go for that knowledge until it's time to execute.
When the last time you visited a funeral home other than when somebody died?
Well, I usually go and see some people in the funeral home services. Yeah, I know every funeral home in San Antonio, damn.
So you just go by there?
I just made it. I kind of like.
But
what they do.
How did you? I'm interested.
How did I get to do that?
Why is that your interest? I mean, how did you get to that?
Because of this very topic. Because I know Black people don't plan, and I knew a lot of people in San Antonio at one time, and so my objective was to make sure that they could get their loved ones buried, and I had to get involved after death, and after the person passed, they had no idea where to go. So I directed them to the several different choices they had. And I spoke with the funeral home. I spoke with them. Even the pickup is the hardest part, because if you haven't made any plans whatsoever, you got to decide it quickly what funeral home you're going to take your loved one to, because the hospital will hold your deceased loved one for 30 days. And then they will donate your loved one's body. That's what they do when you don't make that arrangement with a funeral home. A funeral home has to go to that hospital, pick up that body, and take it to the funeral home. And then if you don't make the arrangements with the funeral home to pay the funeral home, then the funeral home will donate your body. So every step of the process, your deceased one can be donated to science.
Right.
Huh?
But the body still has to be disposed of.
Yeah. And they're not going to do it for free, because it's going to cost to open a grave. It costs to close a grave. And all these costs come out of your pocket.
Right.
Or out of your insurance policy. So it's not a bad idea that most people pay insurance through the funeral home. But what you're paying for, only thing you're paying for at the funeral home is if somebody died, that funeral home will pick up their body. That funeral home will take that body to the funeral home and be prepared to conduct the funeral. But you ain't paying for the embalming. You ain't paying for anything but pick up and transport to the funeral home. And then you got to go to the funeral home and make arrangement for the rest of the things. But if you get a contract prior to that with the funeral home on pickup, embalming, church services, and all the other entities that go along with that, dressing, the wake. A lot of people don't do wakes, the repast, guest speakers, all this.
But I think the most important, I think you talked about it. I mean, I think people have to have a will.
So we could go to the will next, but death is so many steps, and it's so painful to have to do all this without having anything already planned. That's our focus, right? Our point, not our focus. But we have to plan these things. And Black people, please, if you have elderly parents or older people, it's not wrong to ask them about their estate plan. And if you want to make sure your stuff is in order, is something you can do. And that'll be the last part we talk about of this discussion. But I want to make sure we say all these little individual things that has to occur for a person to be in put away in turn.
Right.
So why is it that we won't talk about it? Is there any reason we don't talk about these things? Because I don't know a reason for us not to have the discussion with our family members. And it ain't that we ain't close enough to have the discussion, but it seems like the moment you bring it up, everybody want to get up and walk away because nobody wants to see the elephant in the room.
Well, I know with my mother and with my father, and you probably got some perfect personal examples.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the question was ever asked. I think that I think if you're in a stable, if the family is a pretty stable family,
mm-hmm.
I think that there's a succession. I think that I think when your parents die, they just automatically assume the kids are going to take care of everything, and it's just not a subject you sit around and talk about. I mean, you go home when you go home for Thanksgiving and go home for Christmas, does that subject ever come up at Thanksgiving or Christmas? Did you ever?
That's the perfect time, ain't it? Because everybody there.
But I had plenty of conversations with my dad. I said, Dad, have you ever thought about what you want when after you die? Do you want to be buried here? Especially in the South, things are a little bit more automatic, if you will,
mm-hmm.
in Southern, in the Deep South.
Mm-hmm.
Especially your parents have been involved in the church. That's where they're gonna be buried.
We already know this is the church you're going to. We know this. Yeah.
We already know what funeral home they're gonna go to.
Mm-hmm.
So there are certain things that are just routine in Black life. But when it comes to pre-planning and wills and power of attorneys and all this stuff, I think that's what we are deficient in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that gets stuff talked about enough. I know the NAACP in Houston, I think that they've had seminars and workshops dealing with this issue.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't gone to any, but I think they have had. I know they do with homeowners and stuff and that kind of stuff. But I just think I don't know why we in the Black community don't talk about this more often.
One of the biggest things I've seen is the family has a deed on the property. The people that are elderly, they have the deed on this property, and if they pass and no one has made arrangements to be part of that deed or to be the executor of the will, then that deed is going to the state, and that's the worst thing that's happened. They look forward to taking our properties. And so many Black people have lost so many things, so many pieces of property based on not having an executor of their will, or just leaving it to the state to decide. And how many times have you heard, "Oh, you put me in a cardboard box, I don't give a shit"? I mean, I've heard that too many times from our people. Like, you're gonna put all this burden on your family because that's where it's gonna go, and you already know you ain't done the right things to take care of your future, your burial. You expecting them to do it, and you allow them to do it. You get out the way. You did, and now they got to worry about paying for you to get in turn, and it's a problem. It's a big problem. The worst thing I can see is somebody selling hot dogs and barbecue plates and GoFundMe pages to bury somebody, and if the funeral is $15,000.
That seems to be the thing now. GoFundMe pays medical bills, pays funerals.
Mhm. I'm gonna come back to that part about medical bills at the end because there's something kind of hilarious about that I want to talk about.
Oh, okay.
So we talked about so far we've talked about deaths. That's it. We talked about the funeral home planners, the church or the chapel. Either you're gonna have your funeral in a church or a chapel. If you just want to be taken to the cemetery, you have the choice to do that too without a funeral. Obituary, they want to list all your nieces, nephews, aunts, uncles, cousins. Everybody want to get listed in the obituary, but
Right.
nobody want to pay that $400 or $500 tab on the obituary because the obituary ain't cheap unless you got a small town and you got somebody in the community that does them for $50 or $100, and they're normally not that expensive that way. But if you're getting them done at a printing press plant or something, they run $400-$500 depending on what type of obituary you want. If you want a full page, full size, it's gonna cost, and that's a cost that most people don't think about. It's a big cost. So the limos, if you want one limo or two, the funeral home is gonna try to put you in two. And if they put you in two, you're paying the cost for two. The funeral home want to put you in with six escorts, police escorts on motorcycles. You paying for six escorts on motorcycles. That's hundreds and hundreds of dollars. You paying for the preacher, you paying for the choir, you paying for the church. You got to pay for all these things. But if your family been in this church all his life, and then the pastor wants you to pay them to preach the sermon, you need to whoop his ass. I'm just gonna tell you, because you have no need to have to pay when your family been paying all its life to this particular church, and they should provide that service for you. But a lot of times they're expecting some type of money. We talk about wills and trust funds, or
Mm-hmm.
trust, not trust funds, but putting your properties in a trust. It costs probably, I think the cheapest one I saw was $199 through a lawyer office. I think it was either Rocket Mortgage or something, to put your estate in a trust. To put your estate in a trust basically says when you die, everything you own is converted to A, B, C. Three people, one person, two people, however you want it dispersed, it's a done deal. And you don't have to worry about anything of yours being given to the state for auction or estate sales. And that's what they do. So the money, I mean, the money, the bank accounts, you can put all of these things that you have as a senior citizen in your name in a trust fund or a trust, not trust fund. Put it in a trust, and then the trust will execute your estate based on your wishes. But if you are not, you got all these assets in one place. You got all these properties, you got all these cars, you got all these bank accounts, but none of these are connected to anybody or anything but you. Then you're going to lose all that stuff to the state, and your family will suffer behind it because they're struggling to get money to bury you, but they can't access none of your money to bury you. Even if it's long-term care, same thing. You have to have somebody, and you don't have to necessarily make them aware. Just make sure your trust make them aware. I would suggest having either the will done or the trust done. And in my opinion, the trust is more effective than the will.
Right.
So those things have to be done by the living, the person before they die. And if you can get them to listen for a little while to execute these things, then you can avoid most of the grief. And if the grief part is something that we have failed to learn how to deal with properly, because I can grieve for the rest of my life over a loved one that I lost. You can, anybody can. But when it's time to make plans for that person's transition, there's no time for you in your emotional state. You got to separate the grief from the emotion at the moment of setting up the plan. And if you've done what you're supposed to do by that person that's deceased, then your grief will not be as hard as it will be if you have not done what you're supposed to do by that person. So think about it. The people that cut up the most at funerals are who? People that you probably ain't seen in years, but
Yeah.
they come in and they put on a show. And the worst thing about it, before that, when that person is on a dying bed and about to die, that some families like to fight over bullshit. They like to go in and start snatching cars, snatching bank accounts, finding where's the bank account, where's the insurance policy. Did you have insurance on them? Did they have insurance on them? Who got the policy? We need a death certificate, and only one person should be responsible for ordering death certificates of a deceased, huh?
And that's normally going to be the most responsible person in the family.
Mm-hmm. And that's the person making the arrangements and the execution with the funeral home.
Mm-hmm.
You can order your death certificate through the funeral home at the time of your estate, your planning of the funeral. That's part of the order, and they charge you for that too. And you can order as many copies as you want, but you got to realize that the only time that a person can get a copy or would want a copy desperately is if they have an insurance policy, because if you don't have an insurance policy, you're not worried about a death certificate. The only way you're going to get the insurance policy is with the death certificate and the policy, of course. Many people in the South will have an insurance policy, and if a person is sickly or a person is passed away, then they take the insurance policy to the funeral home and say, hey, we got this policy. Let's make the arrangements based on this policy, and then let's go for it from there. And you're grieving, so the insurance guy sees that you got this $10,000 policy. Your funeral is $10,000. You just
I don't know. I mean, you can. I mean, I think my mother-in-law's funeral was, like I said, I think it's most funerals, unless you're just really into the elaborate funerals, are under $10,000. Unless you want some elaborate,
The last one I noticed, it was $6,700, and that's with everything. That's with the vault, with the casket, with the pickup from the hospital, with the embalming, with the police escort. That's everything, and that was that in the deep South. But here in deep South, in another funeral home, the minimum expense is about $11,000. And I buried my grandfather, and I got his policy for $5,600, but I got it before he passed, and he passed at 96, and all of his stuff was arranged. And then so on with my mother, same thing, all of her stuff was arranged. But I've actually witnessed where people have not made the arrangements. They don't have the insurance.
When your parents died, who made the arrangements? Did you have to make the arrangements, or somebody back?
You made them before they died. You should set a contract with the church or the cemetery or the funeral home before your loved one pass, or if they're at an age where they're in that zone, then you should get everything in order.
I think most Black funeral homes understand the Black community, because that's where they do their business. I mean, I don't see too many Black funeral homes burying white.
No, people. No, not in the deep South.
Like you just see white funeral homes burying Black people.
But you know that they bury their people within 7 days.
But what I'm saying, white funeral homes will bury Black people.
Yeah, they bury Black people.
My brother's funeral was officiated by a white funeral home. There in Virginia. I didn't say nothing. The family picked the funeral home out. But you hardly ever see a Black funeral home officiating a white family's funeral.
Right.
You just don't see it. Have you seen one?
I've never seen that before. It's something when you got to grieve through the funeral, though. Somebody has to have enough intestinal fortitude to get this in order and bring the hard conversation to the family.
Right.
It avoids and you have to have the discussion. Everybody know our grandfather is this age, and we have to be prepared. He may go any day. It's hard to talk about. It's hard to admit, but it's a fact of life. that our grandfather is about to pass.
Yeah, like
And
my
we-
father-in-law is 81.
Mhm.
You
You have
know,
to be prepared.
will he live to be 100 like President
Carter.
Carter with the best healthcare?
You might, yeah. And let's be real. How many of our black families today, what is it, January 12th, have made those arrangements for our seniors? We don't have very many of our families doing this right now, but we're having this conversation because we want you to get this in order before it's too late.
It's a good time. Yeah, it's the beginning of the year.
Mhm. And if you're doing it, if your family owns property, I mean, who wants to go say, Grandpa, don't you have 5 houses here in town? Whose name is on those houses?
Right.
He's not going to tell you. What is the secret?
Well, because I think culturally, remember back in the day, adults had that conversations and kids were forced to be in another room. You know, so there's always been this divide, this separation in this, I don't know whether you call it pride or I don't know what it's called.
We don't have the conversation, and we don't want to have the conversation. We think you're being nosy. We think you're trying to get in our business. We got all these reasons why we won't tell you what our assets are.
You think they think you want to die? You want them to die early so you can get the money? I mean, you know, it's all kind of
trust, right? It doesn't really. You think it's trust?
I don't know what
the reason we don't have the conversations.
You think it's history? You think it's? I mean, what do you think it is?
I think it's.
I mean, it's
it's us not willing to face the reality of what's happening in our lives, and that this is part of our lives. Death is. We have to discuss death, and that's something that makes us cringe and the hair stand up on the back of our necks because that's something we've never done. But I'm here to tell you today that we're grieved in this situation because we're unprepared. Anything you've ever done in life, you have to get prepared for. You have to get prepared for the transition of your elders. You have to be prepared that you're going to do the right thing by your elders when they transition. Because you've seen how people leave some people at the hospital. I was up there for 4 or 5 days a few weeks ago, and I noticed people in ICU about to pass away and nobody there. You know, and these some black folks, mostly white people though. But you have to get this stuff in order. And when you're grieving, the one thing you don't want to do is go tell somebody, oh man, well, Johnny Blow is in a better place. How the hell do you know? You don't. Well, God needed him more than we did. How the hell do you know? You don't. That's why they call it belief. And anything you believe, you don't know. And so you cannot say where Johnny went, and you don't know.
Well, you said that he's especially if he was in pain or suffering with cancer or something, definitely be a better place.
How is that a better place? Dead.
Well, how do you know it's not a better place than the pain of cancer just violating your body?
You don't know, man. There's no way that you can say Joe Blow's in a better place because they're not suffering anymore. But that suffering could be temporary, and it could be something a means to getting better.
Do you think that's a selfish statement on behalf of the person when they say stuff like that?
Yeah, because you don't know. And if I'm grieving, right, I don't want you coming up here telling me it's gonna be all right, Brother Smitty, because so and so's in a better place. You don't know this. So don't console me with a better place. Don't console me with God needed him more than I did, because you don't know what my needs were. You know, so don't think that those are appropriate statements. You can only, to me, if a person is passing and I'm grieving, then the best thing you can do for me is come up and give me a hug and tell me I'm sorry for your loss. Here are my condolences. And then it comes to flowers and money. You can either you're going to send flowers, or the flower shops want $150 minimum for a bouquet, a spray, in most places. I mean, why buy all these flowers are beautiful. Don't get me wrong. Sitting around the casket when it's in the wake, or even at the funeral, when they bring in hundreds of flowers for a deceased. But 75% of those flowers are going to waste after that funeral. You're only going to take probably one. Most people want to bring all the living plants home to their home. And now you got all those plants around your home that are going to die eventually, just like your relative did.
I got one I brought home for my mother, and it's still alive.
So you save yours. See, some people have that.
I just bought one, and it's sitting right here in my office.
Some people can do that. You have that type of concern and care and empathy for your mom, and you every time you look at that plant, I know that you thinking of her. So, but many people get those plants and they just sit them out and they don't last long because they're not plant people. You have to know how to take care of plants in order to be able to do that. So what I'm getting at is, do you want plants or do you want money? Which one is it you want to get? Because it's imperative that you do the best for your family. If you need the money, then you should advise people, don't buy plants, but let you have that $150 that they get ready to give to the white flower shop. Give me that money. But most people don't think that way. They want to spend money on these flowers when they know the family that can use the money. Give them the money. Give them or if you got it like that, give them flowers and money.
Yeah, because the cost of a plant at a funeral it's
expensive.
They're expensive.
Very expensive. And everybody want to act like they so well to do when it comes to asking for money. I don't care how well you are to do. Any money given to a bereaving Black family is beneficial. Huh?
President Carter just died, right? Mm-hmm. They just had his funeral, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many plants did you see?
I didn't see none.
I didn't see any in planes. I didn't see any at the Carter Center.
I didn't see a single plant.
Plants at Washington, D.C.?
No.
So is that us?
Where's his plants?
Yeah. Where's this? I didn't see no plants.
So you think that the white folks that got to a point where they don't buy plants anymore for the deceased?
I'm sure he probably put out the word, because they said Carter planned his whole funeral.
Before he had already had everything in order. Don't put any plant flowers around my
people he wanted to speak, where he wanted to go, the routes he wanted to go, everything, he had planned it out. So he probably had the contributions in lieu of plants, send contributions to the Carter Center. That kind of stuff.
Okay. And that's another thing you could do. You could say, all right, I know I'm going to be passing here in the next 20 years. When I do make donations on my behalf to this charity, don't buy any flowers because I know they're not going to make it. So I'd rather you make donations in my name or in your name on behalf of me.
Somebody, yeah.
Yeah, you could do it that way. But not all the time you need to go buy a spray or a plant or even a token. Sometimes the family can use the money. Put it in an envelope and hand it to the
family. Because the average plant is $80 to $100 or more.
Yeah, you paying to it. I paid $150. I think the biggest thing is if you're grieving, you don't want to be looking for a funeral for a insurance policy. You don't want everybody telling you they in a better place. You don't want everybody coming over, getting into your business. Didn't he own this? Can I get this? You don't want nobody saying what you gonna do with this or what you gonna do with that, because that's not the time. But everybody want to be first to do this, to ask for stuff. Have you witnessed how people magnetize toward the deceased estate and trying to get things? that they don't deserve and fight for things that they have not earned and fight people that put every effort in their entire life of sustaining this person, this elder person. And then they're the ones who get kicked to the curb like they don't know shit, they can't do shit. You ain't gonna make these arrangements for my daddy or my mama or I people fighting it within families over somebody else's stuff. We can't grieve like that. We lose friendship with relatives during funerals. We have fights at the cemetery during funerals, fights at the church. We have people acting crazy as hell at the church over funerals. And it's all done because of what's left and who has access to what's left. Huh?
My brother made me realize something, like he had all kind of awards, he was a command sergeant major. Mm-hmm. He had all kind of awards and medals and plaques and he was real active when he got out. And his kids had all that, when the funeral was over, like his coworkers or people from the military brought more plaques and stuff, right? Recognition and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Resolutions and stuff that just went in the basement. Because we don't build, like we don't build like family places where future generations can go and say, this was your uncle, this is where he, and feel proud about the family members.
Right.
I mean, we don't maintain that story like in the past. Like in the past, it used to be the grandmother's house or your grandparents' house. They would have all that stuff there. Where's pictures of you? If you were to die today, where would all your stuff go?
That is a hell of a question, but I do know it'll go in my daughter's possession.
Right. But beyond her possession, where would it be?
As far as what do you mean? Where would it be?
Would it be on display somewhere? Or would it
probably in a trunk in a closet. And everything packed away in the trunk in the closet. And so one occasion in every 10 years, they may pull it out and look at it, but not every year. So they're not going to be seeing that stuff. They may see one or two items, but like all the plaques and trophies and medals and coins and all that stuff, somebody's trying to figure out how to monetize that stuff and turn it into something that's beneficial. I think a lot of times we, as people with that type of accolades, they should, some of that stuff should be sent to the African American Heritage Museum in DC or the Smithsonian in DC. There are places that you can archive our things that are very, very significant with people that will put it on display for eternity or as long as that system is in order. But most of the part, within a few years, all of our assets are just gone. Somebody give it to this person, give it to that person. People just give away shit randomly, knowing that they have no authority to give away your parents' shit. But they give it away.
I like to go to to Goodwill sometime and just look at the books, right? Just kind of look, because you find a lot of good books that they have fairly cheap. And it saddens me when I see like a veteran's plaque or a veteran's,
in the Goodwill.
Yeah.
And then I've seen places where they throw a lot of stuff on the curb.
Have you?
Yeah. People. I mean, and then the wife will say, "Well, my husband had all these guns or all these car parts. Give me $200 and take everything." Are they tools in the barn? Give me $150 and take everything. They just want to get it out of the way because we accumulate so much stuff, and then we don't do anything with it, and many times we don't want to throw anything away. I'm talking about as seniors, and then you've seen hoarders,
right?
How do you dispose of a hoarder's merchandise?
I don't mean hoarders. I meant like veterans.
I don't mean it like I said. I don't mean it like that.
Yeah,
I ain't calling it hoarders. I'm calling it but we have a lot of stuff. and you got to get rid of that stuff because if you own this property and you've been there for 30, 40 years, you got a lot of stuff. And in order for you to do anything with that property, you have to get rid of some stuff.
Right.
So you're going to be throwing away some of your some stuff that your grandfather really held close to his heart, and he didn't want you to get rid of it. But you got to get rid of it. You got to do something with it, and you don't have room at your place. You don't want to put it in your house. So what are you going to do? You're going to either
you put it in storage, and then just something happens to you, and the storage gets sold off, and then all the stuff disappears.
all the stuff just goes to the highest bidder.
Goes to
So
the
now all of those things that you worked so hard to accumulate over your entire life are now in the middle of the community. Everybody in their mama got a piece of it. But so after the fact, it's a rough road to travel to deal with a death in the family. But we have to deal with it.
because you're not dealing with just death, you're dealing with grief.
But yeah, grief too.
You know,
You're
because
dealing with grief and death. Does that mean knocking stuff over?
the death is the easy part. The person that died got the easy part.
Yeah. All they gotta do is go for the ride.
It's the living
Yeah.
that's got the consequences. It's the living that's got to suffer because the person didn't have insurance. It's the living that's got to suffer because the person didn't have a will. It's the living that's got to suffer because you don't have a listing of all the bank accounts. And so it ain't the dying, it's the living. And
The living that has to deal with everything.
right.
So right now, the ideal situation for a person going through this type of process is to get prepared ahead of time, not to wait until the person passes.
It's
Get it in order now.
to do
And
it.
like I say, you can get a will and definitely a trust set up for as little as $200 through Rocket Mortgage or some other, not Rocket Mortgage, Rocket Trust or something.
It's a record mortgage.
Rocket Trust. And set your family up for success where none of your items will be auctioned off by the state. Because some of us think we got $1 million in assets and all this other stuff, but it's difficult to dispose of those things. Like your most valued and your most treasured things. Let's say, for instance, my most valued and most treasured thing would be, let's say, the banners behind my head. What's going to happen with my banner? It's going to go to the garbage more likely. And I understand that because that's the way it goes. None of this stuff will mean anything to me when I'm dead and gone. But I would hope that much of my stuff be passed down generation after generation after generation after generation until somebody make use of it like I have. Huh?
But does it get passed down from generation to generation to generation? What your great grandfather and your great grandmother? What do you have from that time here on Earth?
I have a couple of things. I have a pair of glasses from my Aunt Name, and those glasses were. She was born in 1896, 1897, I think. So I have her glasses, which seem like they're about 2 or 3 inches wide and small. But I have those, and then I have a cedar chest from my grandmother who was born like 1901. And that cedar chest still smells like cedar. It's still in good shape. And
from my parents' house, I have, and they're both deceased, I have this famous Black American's portrait. It was produced by, I think, Ebony or somebody, but it's a portrait. It's a wooden plaque, and it's got famous Black Americans. That's one thing I kept. And then the other thing I have is I got 1 volume of Compton Encyclopedia, because that's where my thirst for learning came from. That was social media back then.
So what color are those books?
Beige.
I got the whole set.
You got
National,
I
the
just got,
whole.
well, different family members took a volume, so I just got one.
I was looking at them yesterday, and they were printed in '66, and those, and they got the whole set of those books. National, and
You got the whole set?
I got the whole set, man, and
Oh,
and it's the oldest thing in the house, I think. But
but I was the only one knew about Compton encyclopedias.
no, I got, and then I got
Is that company still around?
no, I doubt it. I doubt it. I got the standard American Standard and Red Books encyclopedias. I got a couple of sets. I got those. I got probably 2-3 sets of encyclopedias. That no, I ain't opened it in 20 years. Seem like they're so damn fragile. They were so old. The pages have changed colors.
Right.
It's some old books, and I really thought that whole set was one of the first sets my mother had, and I still keep them right where nothing can happen to those books. Those will be passed on. I'm passing it on now.
Families are so mobile, and
even though you never use them again, you don't need them, but it's something that they use or we used as children.
Oh yeah, constantly. That was our window to the world. Those encyclopedias.
So, and then the other thing is the death dates of our ancestors. We really lose track of our ancestors all the time because we don't keep up with the obituaries. My sister is an obituary fanatic.
She keeps them all.
She has over 500 obituaries. Everybody in my hometown that died that's black, she got the obituary.
Wow.
And I'm telling you that all the way back to the late 1800s, she's got, I couldn't believe that shit. She got an obituary for everybody. And people come to her now saying, George, do you have an obituary for so-and-so? Yeah, I got one. She know exactly what she got to.
Now, my sister, I keep obituaries of family members.
Yeah.
And funerals, some funerals I've gone to,
mm-hmm.
I keep the obituary.
She don't miss a beat on that. She go to funerals.
Wow.
She been to all of them. Not all of them,
but this is really a great subject to be talking about because I think we got a lot of work to do on this subject.
Well, shitload of work. This could be a topic every week for the next 3-4 weeks because if we could take death and talk about that over 3 or 4 series.
Yeah.
And then come in with grief 3 or 4 series, and then their afterlife 3 or 4 series. So as today we've discussed death, grief, and the afterlife, it's so much about it. I don't even know how I can break it down, but I wanted us to do a breakdown of what your overall thoughts are.
Well, where
you at with it.
These books were stored in boxes, right? So I pull them out for the show.
Mm.
The
ones you just showed us.
What I just showed you.
Can you go do a recap of your whole belief on the death, grief, and the afterlife, and show us those books again? And then we've been on a little over an hour, so we'll get ready to close.
Okay, just a couple of books, like for those family members that are out there. There are veteran planning guides that you can get from any funeral home. Any credible funeral home has these documents, and it's spelled out from A to Z. If you have a veteran in the family.
Is there a number to order one of those books?
This one. Well, I don't promote this company, but this was produced by Dignity Memorial, and that's where I got this one from. And it's honoring those who served.
It's not a Department of Defense document.
It was from Dignity. You can go to dignitymemorial.com/veterans, and a number is 1-866-508-5834. And I'm sure that there are others out there. So I'm not promoting this company.
Okay.
But this is just one book that I have for because I am a veteran. And then this end of life planning guide. You can get this from any funeral home. This one's produced by a guide to home care, hospice, bereavement, and funeral planning services in your local area. And this is the Houston End of Life Planning Guide. And this is produced by the Texas Funeral Directors Association. So that's another good book to have. And this is guidelines at time of need. Guidelines have, and this was produced by a local funeral home, McCoy Funeral Home here in Houston. So these documents are available from the state, from local funeral homes. And then this was from Grief Share, Your Journey from Mourning to Joy. And
can you move it over just a little bit? Can't see but a corner of it.
This was from
all right. Okay, Grief Share.
Yeah, Grief Share. And this is a program that was put on by at the church.
Okay.
And on dealing with grief, and so there are plenty of materials out there. But it's one of those subjects that Black people don't talk about, or we don't discuss, or we don't.
Let me ask you this, Clark. Would you think that having a open a form, like a signed login form where we can have a seminar on stuff like death, grief?
I mean, we could, like I say, just talking about it, just having a show and discussing it, I think is important. I think it's death, health, all these different components of Black life that are underrepresented in so many different ways. We got the least number of Black doctors. I think it's somewhere around only 7 to 10% of all the doctors are African American.
Right.
So, I mean, there's just certain elements of our lives that we don't talk about, that we don't discuss, that we don't come to grips with. I think if we spend as much time talking about some of these subjects as we do about voting, I think that we'd have less trauma in our families. And it is hard to talk about death. I probably don't. Do you talk about it? I mean, do you do a lot of planning with your family? Or
my plan, I think I'm one, if it's a death coming around in my family, I'm the first one they call. Because
you're the man. See, like my sister is the first one they call. Like in the Foster family, my sister would be the first one that they call.
Yeah, I've been called a lot.
Why would they call you? I mean, have you?
My family think I'm crazy anyway. They think I'm ruthless and that I can deal with emotional situations without getting into an emotional situation. That's why, because I'm real reserved with my emotions.
But obviously you've been the point man, so to speak, within your family in terms of
right. Yeah. And it's important that you cover all bases. And we've had every one of my relatives that we've had a transition with has been a smooth operation.
And you've been a part of of the process.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think a lot of Black families have that point person, don't you think?
Yeah, I do.
That kind of.
But it's more that don't have anybody, because we have so little structure in some of our impoverished families. When I say little structure, I don't mean bad people or anything. I mean that we're not discussing items like burial and funeral arrangements. People not valuing the life of people. We get angry. I mean, it's death.
So it's not a subject that we talk about until a person is near death.
Yeah, until it's almost too late.
Yeah.
And then if the person is not responsive and they don't have, and you're trying to make funeral arrangements, you really got to struggle to get that information, and you don't want to browbeat a person that's dying over funeral arrangements. So how do you get around that is basically just prepare prior to, because you wait till it's that time, you're really not gonna get things done. And like I'll tell you, one of the biggest mistakes I think I made was when I went off to the military, I failed to pay attention to what was happening in my family structure. And when you fail to pay attention to what's happening in your family structure and people start to get old, there's a lot of abuse going on. There's a lot of embezzlement going on. A lot, for instance, your grandfather could be a multi
I agree.
millionaire.
I agree with that because the reason why that happens is, especially those of us that are waiting for a job or in service or something like that, the person that's left behind, regardless of who's left, that's the person that's left behind.
Yeah, end up with dealing with a problem,
right?
Situation. It
and,
is a problem.
And the situation. And elderly family members going to gyrate to those people that are close by, in terms of.
And many of them are so desperate for money that they may start taking money from our elderly people. Just like I've had a lady that passed last week, and she was the sole owner of this 4-story building in Chicago. And soon as she died, man, the vultures came out the woodworks and just pillaged that building, taking her shit. And it's so sad to see stuff like that happen. It's almost like they was all lined up waiting on her to die so they can get into her level of the floor. All the family living on other levels and being taken care of by her. And then as soon as she died, they take all her shit, and then they pillaged her bank accounts. And people do that.
And because people are left, you have family members that were there or are there. It's hard to question them.
Yeah,
financial decisions, or what happened to the money, or who's got the deeds to the property.
I'll tell you a case.
They could be taking out loans against the property.
Yep. You got, and then they're not gonna pay it back. So the bank will end up owning the property that you've owned for the last 50 years, real quick. And basically it goes to say you don't own anything, because if you don't, for instance, you don't own anything that's publicly available, like transportation, real estate. Those items are usually the first to be taken out of your family, and the bank won't hesitate to do it. The loan companies won't hesitate to do it, and everybody wants to take out a loan on everybody else's stuff. This person had a grandfather who came from up north with about $100,000 in cash, and within 6 months, that $100,000 had dwindled down to about 10,000. And when somebody found out about it, they took the last 10,000 from the account and put that 10,000 on, not the whole 10,000, but put most of that on a funeral program contract. So when this person passed, everything was taken care of already. And it would have been too late to try and take care of it, because nobody would have had another $10,000 to pay for their burial. What we didn't talk about already, Claude, is what they call it when they take you to the more, they put you in the urn. Cremation. Cremation is another option too. Funeral going to cost you, the cheapest funeral I saw was $6,800, but the cheapest cremation is only going to be about probably $900.
Yeah, I've considered I've been considering that.
Cremation. Yeah, it's cheap, but it's still expensive if you ain't got no money. So
no, I've gone to enough funerals and I've seen enough funerals converted into development that just
You
because you
seen what? You seen what?
seen land that what people are buried on,
Yeah.
graves being moved,
Yep.
relocated, somebody of them bought the property, sold the property. I
They
mean,
moved my grandmother's graveyard, grave,
yeah.
and she had a metal fence post thing
Mhm.
around her grave and a headstone, and they moved it to in order to run a highway through there, and now we don't know where it's at.
See,
No clue. And then a friend of mine was telling me how the farmers knocked over all the headstones of this black cemetery, and so his tractor can have a place to turn around.
wow.
Ain't that something? With no consequences.
No, yeah, no. Who's going? Yeah,
And they tell me that the certain, I guess you have to look at the classification of land for schools and cemeteries. It's the same classification. I think it's, I forget what they call it, but it's a certain title of land designated for those two items. And people have a tendency to encroach into those lands that
Mhm.
black people have been awarded by the state and taking it by inch, and before you know it, they're all up on the gravestones and the buried bodies. There's so many places like that in America where it's been lost.
Right.
Our cemeteries,
Now,
we're neglecting our cemeteries too.
yeah, but we should probably do another subject. I mean, this is Black History Month. It's a good month. I mean, we're coming up on black. We're
So
coming
you
up.
want to do another one on
Well,
death?
I think we're coming up on our. You know, I think these kind of subject matters don't get discussed enough, and so I applaud you for identifying this subject.
So what would you like to talk about next week? Same thing? We're going to go deeper? Because cremation processes we have to talk about and what happens after that, and and how that works. We also got to talk about how to do it. We should be talking about how to get the trust done. We should be showing samples of wills. I can pull both of those out and have that available for next week, where we can talk about trust and wills and death. That way we go deeper into this taking care of our seniors. Yeah. So with that, Claude, let me have your final statements, and then we'll call it a day, and we'll be back next week.
Well, no, I just think this is a great subject. I think it's a subject that has a significant impact on the African American community.
Right.
And I applaud. I'm glad that we had an opportunity to discuss it. So I look forward to future discussions about, death, about planning, and this whole framework around what happens when we're no longer here.
Okay. All right. So next week we'll go back into this particular subject, and I want to thank our co-host, Mr. Claude Foster, for coming to our show today and talking about his knowledge and thorough background in these arrangements. And we're going to take it to another level next week, similar to the same subject. If you're interested in learning more about wills and trust, please be here, because that will be part of the death topic next week. So thank you, Mr. Claude Foster, for your participation in our discussion today. And I look forward to us going into our next topic next week. Thank you so much. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Black News Network, the real voice of Black USA, broadcasting from a Black perspective. We do not own the rights to the music, but we do own the rights to what we say. We will be back next week at 3:30 p.m., bringing you another show that will give you some enlightenment about our lives as Black people functioning here in America. Thank you so much for watching the Black News Network. I am Smith-Bey, your host for BNN 247. Please don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at BNN 247. Like us on Facebook at BNN 247, Twitter BNN 247, X CNN, I guess 247, or the Black News Network. Thank you so much for joining us. But don't forget, have a great day today and a better day tomorrow. This is Paul Smith signing off.